In tarmac, in the dry, in the sun, in the mud, in the rain. Everything comes through with the Jeep, and it does in the Audrain Museum Network. Join us now. Have fun. The Jeep has been a part of American life from its introduction in 1940 through today. The Wranglers of today, which are the hereditary successors of the vehicle I'm standing in front of right now, are very, very different, but it's about the spirit, how these very basic utility vehicles became a part of American life in a way that really is hard to imagine otherwise. This is a very early CJ civilian Jeep, a 2A from 1946, and it tells a wonderful story of both the incredible work that Willys, some say Willys, created before World War II and how they built an empire on a single model that, frankly, today has sustained no fewer than 5 companies. But let's start at the heart of this. This is the civilian Jeep. At the end of World War II, the Willys Corporation had a challenge, a problem. Their one model that they had built hundreds of thousands of was the MB, the actual military Jeep from World War II. It had been designed in collaboration with American Bantam and Ford and Willys got the contract to actually manufacture these vehicles. They were astonishing, and they proved so much a part of the World War II experience, not only just for Americans, but for all of the Americans' allies around the world, that it really transformed the motoring landscape in a way that could not have been imagined beforehand. The brief was for a quarter-ton utility vehicle that could basically take the place of a horse. The cavalry was absolutely out of date by 1940, and militaries around the world realized that they had to do something to replace the mobility that they got on the battlefield with the horses. The Germans were very advanced in this, and in fact, the Kraftdruckfreude Kugelwagen, which would be later known in the US as the VW Thing, was something that the Germans had developed before World War II and used to very, very effective use during the war as it started in 1939. The Allies knew that they had to come up with something equivalent, or perhaps even better, in order to match that battlefield utility. And so the brief was very simple. It had to be something which is very lightweight, durable, easy to repair and maintain on the battlefield, and also adaptable for various uses. It fulfilled that brief brilliantly, and although people like to talk about the great GI discovery of sports cars in World War II and how they all had an experience in the UK with an MG and came back clamoring for it, the reality was that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of GIs had experience with this vehicle, and the US was still an agricultural nation at the end of World War II. So a lot of folks came back thinking, that Jeep that I used during the war could be really useful on the farm, on the ranch, in forests, and so it'd be really great to have one of those vehicles. And so Ward Canaday, who was running Willys, saw an opportunity to come up with a civilian model of the Jeep. And they came up with it, and this is the first one they marketed. One of the things, of course, when people think of World War II Jeeps, they think Army green. And so when the CJ was introduced, one of the things that the Willys Corporation did to make it as appealing as possible was to offer it in an amazing array of colors. I was shocked to discover not long ago that this car was offered in 21 different colors, all with contrasting wheels for added pizzazz. It wanted to show the spirit and energy of post-war America. But the heart of this was the engine. And this engine was the reason why Willys got the contract for the Jeep. The 134 cubic inch Go Devil engine. This is an engine they had designed for a pre-war car called the AmeriCar, which is going to be their entry into a basic transportation car that they felt was very needed at the end of the 1930s. The Depression was just winding down, but there's still a need for a middle-class car that could be run very economically, could be repaired easily by a home mechanic, and this engine was the key to that concept. It won the contract for the Jeep with the government because as opposed to the adapted Ford tractor engine that Ford had proposed for their Jeep prototype, this one put out 60 horsepower, which was far more than the 40 horsepower that the Ford tractor engine put out, and did it in a way that was very useful. It's a flathead inline four and very durable, and as they found out during World War II, extremely easily repairable. So this was just the thing for the farmer, for the rancher, and for anyone who had a use for a utility vehicle. This was still a very utilitarian vehicle, and it was interesting that the first models that they sold were basically alternatives to the tractor. So they came with a driver's seat. Optional was a passenger seat, a rear view mirror, 2 taillights, because otherwise you had 1 taillight and a reflector, and a top. This example has the passenger seat and a rear view mirror, but no top. One of the big differences, of course, between the military Jeep and the civilian Jeep was the fact that the civilian Jeep had to have a tailgate. So the spare tire moved from the rear of the vehicle over to the side to make room for the tailgate. They also had a number of options such as power takeoffs from the front or rear axles, winches, snow plows, everything to make this as usable a vehicle in the civilian setting as possible. Its use as a recreational vehicle was somewhat far in the future when this Jeep was built, but the Willys company still had an idea of how they might be able to make it a little more user-friendly, but that's another story, the Jeepster. Coming back to this is a vehicle that combined incredible practicality and usability. So it's not the kind of thing that you're going to go for a long weekend drive in, but I think that today, for a nice drive across the fields of the farm, it'd be just the thing. So let's take it for a drive. On the road with the Jeep CJ2A, I am immediately reminded that this is very much a utility vehicle, but also very quickly reminded of its role in replacing the cavalry. You're high as if you're up on a horse. It's agile because it can turn very quickly, as a horse can. And although the ride, I guess, is smoother than riding a horse, although I guess if you're an expert horse person, then the ride on a horse can be fairly smooth, if eventually a bit bumpy on your rear end. This is a very basic vehicle. It's also quite lively. One of the things that happened with the replacement for the Jeep after World War II was that Ford actually built the M151, which was a much more sophisticated vehicle than the Jeep, but it had some handling issues, especially as relating to swing axles and overturning, but that's another story. You can obviously tell what this is built for and the speeds at which it's comfortable. Basically, 25, 30 miles per hour is really as fast as you want to go in this vehicle. And you really didn't need to go much faster in its either its combat iteration or field iteration, or frankly, in its post-war agriculture and mining and ranching situations. Let's figure out where there it is. There's a switch for the windshield wiper. It's incredibly useful. Now I can see perfectly. On paved surfaces, it behaves the way you expect a vehicle with this high center of gravity and very short wheelbase to behave. But it's more refined, I think, than a lot of people would expect. And I think a lot of that has to do with the engine, which is really designed to be very flexible and deliver power in a very smooth and even way. And one of those engines like most built in the 1930s that are designed to deliver as much power as possible in top gear, so you don't have to do a lot of shifting. That was sort of not the point at all they wanted to make. The experience of driving one of these after you get off the pavement is what we're going to experience very shortly. And that's where this is designed, and that's the entire point of this vehicle. So you get that idea, and you know, it's one of those vehicles that, much like a veteran car from pre-World War I, it handles best when what's happening is what's happening right now. We're on an unpaved road, it's wet, but if I let the wheel dance a bit, the vehicle's much more secure and stable. And it feels, frankly, more at ease than it did on the paved road. And that's something which is not surprising at all. And having one of these without a top actually makes more sense as well, because all the structural stability in a vehicle like this is definitely in the body and not in the top. One thing learned when I did some Land Rover driving over at Goodwood is to let the vehicle climb down in the gear, which again makes it much more responsive than if you try to drive it. It's one of the strange contradictions of off-roading. And of course, I'm in two-wheel drive. These are four-wheel drive vehicles, but their default mode is rear-wheel drive. And you select the switch on the floor to engage the four-wheel drive, and then you have a choice of high or low ratios. It pulls very cleanly away in second gear. Wants to slide a bit. This grade might be a little much for third gear. Let's see what she'll do. I'll downshift to second. And like the horses and mules that are replaced, it's ready for action. This is really its element. And it's this ability to go off-road, but not extremely so, that would make it so incredibly appealing to the leisure crowd that would take it up in a few years afterwards. Back onto tarmac. I think it really was a lot happier on the gravel and mud back there. But one of the things that also makes Jeeping so enjoyable is the immediate response that you have in this vehicle. Just as the GIs who discovered the sports car in the UK during World War II, I think a lot of GIs who drove the Jeep during World War II discovered a handiness and a maneuverability that they hadn't experienced before in a car. And I think that they were very, very, very happy to be able to find this in a vehicle that they could use on their farms and ranches, or to go fishing, or in camping trips. That's what it's all about. And as the as the drizzle increases here, I feel more and more back at home. My father probably had an experience like this in World War II in Italy with a Jeep. There's a lot more at stake when he was driving it than it is for me driving it today. And that's another thing that we can certainly add to those incredibly great men and women who use this in very different circumstances. It really does give a great idea of what's capable. The government brief for the general purpose vehicle was very specific for a quarter-ton truck with a short wheelbase for maneuverability, strength and durability, also enough power to get through the areas it needed to get through. And the vehicle fulfilled its duty quite well. Even in two-wheel drive, it's very capable. There's a reason why Jeeps are legendary. They take you everywhere you need to go with the sure-footedness of the most reliable and capable pack animal. Nothing stops the Jeep.